I would like to go over some of these unusual things here in this booklet that was put together. And the first one here was taken in 1957. I was ordained 5 years at that time. And it's a first communion class there. And if you look at it, they're all Hispanics. And there's about 21 or 23 of them in there. And I was in Resurrection Parish, which was right in Denver Harbor, was off Lyons Avenue and Market Street then. There was no freeways in Houston at that time. The first Gulf Freeway was 1956. And so it was very slow commuting around. And we went out to McCarthy Street, we went out Highway 90 to the reservoir, and there was no St. Dominic's Church there then. And I went out to the 7900 block of Waxahachie, Longview, and to the homes. And on this one block, there was 23 children that had never been to church. They didn't have a car, or their father worked on Saturdays. So I went out to their house on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, and I had catechism class. And it was about a fourth the size of this section here. And 23 children sat on the floor. I sat in a chair. If you look at it closely, the girl there on that end was handicapped, and she was in a wheelchair, and she was about 7 or 8 then. And she was a wonderful child. Sometimes she'd stand, sometimes she would sit. But I was teaching them, and she gets walking up towards me, and she sits in my lap, and then she puts her arm around my neck, and then she went on me. And all the children started laughing. And then I took her, and I held her in my arms, and I held her up, and I said, "You're a beautiful child of God." And I said, "Jesus loves you, and I love you too." And I kissed her on her cheeks and that then, and I set her back down. And you know, from that day on, I never had one problem with any child in that group, because they knew that I loved them, and I cared about them, and I was interested in them, and I was looking after them. And every one of them came to Resurrection, and we had their first communion. And this is a picture of 23 children that never would have made the first communion if the priest was not willing to go to their home and teach catechism in their home. And that was one of the things that the Lord was prompting me to do. The Lord moved me to do that. We had CCE in the summertime then, and you teach it for 3 weeks, Monday through Friday, from 9 to 12. And we had about 300 or 500 people all strung out along the Wayside Drive, McCarthy Street, Highway 90, and didn't have a way to get to church for catechism. So I went to your good friend, Msgr. Joe O'Sullivan. Yeah. Was it Joe? What was his first name? Yeah. And anyway, he was at Galena Park, and he was real buddies with the football coach. And the football coach now was more important than the principal of the school or the superintendent of school. The football coach did everything. And so Father Joe told him that I'd like to borrow a school bus. No problem. Gave me the keys to a brand new school bus, air conditioned, in 1953. And I went down, I got up at 6 o'clock and had Mass at 6. Then I had a bite to eat. I drove out Highway 90, 10 miles, and started picking up children along the road there for catechism. And then I'd bring them to church, and I'd go back out McCarthy Street and go down McCarthy Street. Ended up with 3 or 4 children. And then at 12 o'clock, I'd take them back, and it'd be 1 o'clock before I'd finish and have lunch. And we did that, and we had the first communion class that had about 200 children in it because we was able to have a bus. Imagine that now. And for 3 weeks, it sat on our property, Galena Park School Department. For a day, if they saw a bus on a Catholic church, they'd have it turned in within 30 minutes, you know. But those days, things like that could happen, and things like that could take place. And in 1953, no, I'm going to go back to my seminary days. I went to the seminary in 1945, and the war ended on August the 6th, and it was the end of World War II. And in 47, the second summer, they sent me up to New Ulm and Eagle Lake. That would be in the Austin Diocese now. The Austin Diocese didn't start till 1948. And our diocese went all the way up to within 100 miles of Dallas and 100 miles of San Antonio and all the way to Louisiana then in East Texas. And there at New Ulm, Father Cappy was 2 years older than myself. We taught catechism for 3 weeks at New Ulm, and then we drive 25 miles to Eagle Lake and have catechism there. And the pastor there had been an electrician before he was a priest for using lightning and power. And at that time, they did not have electricity in 1947 in their barns. And so after catechism, we had lunch, and the rectory was not air conditioned. He'd lay down in front of the door for the breeze for 15 minutes, and then he said, "Get up, we're going to work." I said, "What kind of work?" He said, "We're laying electricity in the barn so these people out here can have electricity." And he'd buy all the equipment, and they'd go to the barns, and it took 2 or 3 days to get the electricity in, and then they'd pay him for the parts and then give a donation to the church. During the 3 weeks we were there, I think we equipped 8 barns with electricity from about 1 to 4 o'clock. And that was a pretty busy day, getting up at 6 o'clock and then having catechism in 2 places, driving 25 miles, coming back to the rectory, and then going and working in the hot sun. And barns, you know, only have 2 openings, 1 door in the front and 1 door in the back. And all the rest is metal. And so that was quite an experience that summer there in New Ulm and Eagle Lake. And then was ordained in 52, and right away the pastor there was ill. He was 42, and he'd been ill for about 5 or 6 years, still working. And he told the bishop he needed an assistant. And there was 10 of us being ordained. And he said, "I don't ask for the smartest one. I don't ask for the holiest one. Give me the strongest one." And so I was sent there. And you wouldn't believe, I was with him a year and a half before he died in 44 on December the 28th. But every Easter, every Christmas, First Communion, anything of importance, he'd be ill. He really, his family, one brother died at 28, one sister at 34, and he died at 44 then. It ran in the family. And the bishop appointed me as administrator, and he sent 2 older priests there with me to be with me. And I was in charge, and at that time you had to be 12 or 15 years ordained to be a pastor. And all these older pastors were coming, assistants coming there, some 10 or 12 years old. "What in the hell are you doing here?" I said, "Go ask the bishop, I don't know, but I'm here." And so anyway, and after a year, he appointed, not a year, about 10 months or 12 months, a pastor. And it was from Christ the King, and I'd been his altar boy. And he was going to be the first pastor. And he didn't even want, it took me 6 months to get him to go to the bank and sign checks. He said, "Just keep doing what you're doing," which was running the parish. And so anyway, I was there 9 years, and other assistants came and went, but I remained there 9 years, which was highly unusual. And I coached boys football, baseball, basketball, and girls volleyball and softball. I taught 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade religion from 9 to 12 in the morning in the school. In those days, assistant pastors taught in the elementary schools, usually catechism. So I had quite a full day. And I'm also in charge of athletics for the city of Houston and parochial schools. On Thursday, my day off, I went to what's called the CYO Center next to Austin High School, and I cut grass either 2 football fields or 2 baseball fields every Thursday, walking behind the Yazoo mower. you know, and you don't get a ride that you're walking up, that just is up and down the football field or baseball field. And I did that for about 6 years. So I kept busy. And the first year there at Resurrection, we won the City of Houston Parochial Championship in football. And for the 6th grade and under, we had an 8th grade and under. And on the 6th grade and under, we beat St. Anne's on a Sunday afternoon at St. Thomas High School. And we had about 500 people there, and they had about 1,500 people. And we beat them 13-7. And if you look at the football team, you will see they have different colored jerseys there because we didn't have any money. I went to the Salvation Army and I bought 30 jerseys for $1 a part, and that's what they wore. But we beat and undefeated. And one of the mothers wrote this poem. God in his wisdom gave us you, our coach of football, wise and true, which sent us to you by the master's call. You filled our needs, both great and small. You taught us sports and all good deeds. Your words of wisdom we greatly heed. You made us work hard with might and main. No one knew the plan of your brain. The little leaguers of Resurrection, we are now the best, the city champions. Father O'Connor, our priest and our friend. For put us there, we're champs, oh boy. Boys who are sure to follow you around, learn football, battle with feet on the ground. You have stood by us through thick and thin, cheering us on, another title to win. Long are our laughs and our joy. Thank our Lord for Father O'Connor. And then President Horn, and then up in Conroe, you know, really God works in strange ways, very strange ways. I was left Resurrection and went to Queen of Peace for 4 years as an assistant. And Bishop Fiorenza was the first assistant there. He stayed 3 years, and then he didn't want to be an assistant anymore. He went to St. Joseph Hospital as chaplain, because supposedly the pastor at that time at that church was the hardest pastor in the diocese. To give you an example, he would go on vacation. In January, you had to turn in your report the last of January. And he'd get his report in the first 2 weeks of January, and then go to Laredo to visit his mother for 2 weeks. But we had a cook, and there was 2 or 3 of us assistants there. And while he was gone for 2 weeks, he left the menu there, and she had to follow it 3 times a day, 7 times a week. And if she didn't follow it, she would be fired. And she had the key to the deep freeze. We could never open the deep freeze if she was in the deep freeze. In fact, Bishop Fiorenza, there's a hamburger joint, Jaime's, across the street. And he said he wouldn't have survived if it hadn't been for Jaime's. And anyway, we heard confessions from 4 to 6 on Saturdays and 7 to 9. And our dinner on Saturday was a chicken pot pie. At that time, it's about 6 inches round. I think they cost $0.25. And that was our meal after 4 hours in the confessional. But we survived, we survived. And then I went to the Black Parish, St. Mary of the Purification, and was there 2 years as pastor. And I enjoyed it very much, and I loved the people. And one day, Bishop Barkasi calls me, I want you to go to Conroe. I said, Bishop, I like where I'm at. He said, you'd like it anywhere. Anyway, he said, I want you to go. I said, all right, but if you send me, you can just keep moving me about. I said, I don't care. All I have is my golf clubs and nothing any larger. So just give me 30 minutes notice and I'll go. And would you believe that's been the history of my life since. And I was at 10 different parishes. One time, it was really funny, Bishop Fiorenza sent me to the parish and he said, clean up that mess. They had 3 pastors in a year and a half. One died, one left in the middle of the night, and the other was messing things up. Just go there and clean up the mess. It's really funny. I'm not going to mention what the name of it was. I went there, and after about a month or 2 months, the bishop came, and he said, you made some changes. I say that in different places. Things have changed. He said, did you write for permission to then those days anything more than $500? You didn't have the approval from the bishop. I spent $100,000 here, $50,000 there, $25,000 there, and he said, did you get permission? I said, no, Bishop. You told me to clean up the mess. That's what I did. He said, I'm not going to ask you any more questions. And the rest of the time, he never bothered to ask me. And I sent in a request for any changes of anything I wanted to do. And then I went to chaplain. I went to for All Saints for a couple of years. But I was taking care of my mother. I was the only child, and my father had died. And I wanted to come to a smaller place, so I asked for Highlands, and they said, okay, for a while you can go there. And so I went there, and after about 4 or 5 years, my mother died. And today she died. She went to a Christmas party at the Methodist Church. The Methodist Church building, auditorium had burned down, and so we let them use our auditorium for about a year. It was really funny. And also they had the Rotary Club every Tuesday there, and they had about 50 meetings. And the Methodist minister was a good friend. He worked with Patu at the Seaman Center for years. And after they got back in the building, they gave us a beautiful cross. We didn't even charge them for the air conditioning, anything, just let them use it. And he said, there's only one thing, Father Fred. He said, that kitchen, it is true, where the sink was, no matter if you was tall or short, you bend over, it was real deep to wash the dishes. You get a pain in your back. And so all of them said they got that pain in their back with their dishwasher. And he said, well, why did y'all have it like that? And I said, well, knowing in the future, I thought I might have to baptize some of you Methodists. And he started laughing and he walked out the door. And the other Rotarian said, that's the first time anybody ever got the best of him. You did. And so anyway, after there then, they said a vacancy came for the chaplain at the Harris County Jail. If anybody wanted the job, apply for it. Well, or I tell the bishop. And I told him I would be interested in going, but if some younger priest wanted the job, to give it to him. I was already ordained 33 years, and I was about 55 or 6 or 7. And so anyway, nobody applied. There was 300 priests could have had that job. Nobody applied for it. You could see it wasn't very enticing. And so I took it. And the bishop would call me at night, and he'd never say, this is the bishop. He'd just start talking, and after about the first line or two, I'd recognize him and just start in then. And so anyway, he said, this is a hard job. And he said, you're really not that young. Do you think you can do it? I said, I don't know. I might fall flat on my face, but I'll go back to being a pastor. I'll try. Well, I no sooner got the job, and I found out that they were changing 3 floors, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and there's a closet about this side. It's a storage closet, this section here, and there was no windows and nothing, just a door there. And they was going to make it a chapel on the 6th, 7th, and 8th floor. And so I had Mass on the 2 to the 12th floor, 5 days a week for 20 days in all. And I could only take half a floor at a time because we couldn't accommodate any more. And there was also Protestant services every day on different floors. And so anyway, I kept begging because it was so hot in there. It was about 110 degrees. You turn the fan on, they couldn't hear. And then pass out 2 or 3 of them. You'd have to kick the door to get their attention to come in there and carry them out. And I'd take my shirt off and just put the alb and the stove over me. And I had to have 6 services a month in those 3 rooms with no air conditioning, no window, no fan, or nothing. And I never got sick or anything, and I was able to do that. And they just came once a month, and usually 2 or 3 or 4 of them would pass out in there, about 60 or 80 fellas. And so they'd have to be carried out. And so I kept complaining. And finally, when the air conditioning was put in, it was the best at any place in the jail. Even all the deputies would come in the summertime. It was usually about 80 degrees in there. And in my chapel, it was 60 degrees. So they'd come in there to keep cool. And one time, I had a lot of trouble with some of the deputies. And I really, all I wanted to do was do their job. That I had a mass, and I went in there at 1 o'clock. It was always 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And right in the middle of the floor was about 500 jumpsuits of dirty laundry. And you have 6 floor workers on each floor. And I asked them to clean up to get ready for church. And they just went off, and finally I asked them again. They went off. Then I went down to the deputies, and there were 4 of them playing dominoes in the corner. And I said, ask them to clean up the chapel so we could have service. And they didn't do anything. So I went in charge in front of the sergeant's office on the floor. And there were 2 attorneys there, a man and a woman behind the glass, wanting them to go get their clients. Well, they were piddling around and didn't do it, and making them wait. And so I get right in front of the sergeant's office and say, Sergeant! Sergeant! Come out! Come out! What's the matter? What's the matter? I said, your deputies need to get off their rump and get the chapel clean so we can have service. Don't talk like that. Don't talk. I said, I will. I'll go to the sheriff. And so they got it taken care of. And it was funny that I was there 10 years. I broke every rule. I never got punished. And all the other, we had a Protestant, a Baptist, a Methodist, Episcopalian minister. And they said, O'Connor, how come they never punish you for breaking the rules? I said, I got too much on all of them. I thought they'd be fired. And so anyway, it was funny that I wasn't there very long, about 30 minutes, and the sheriff interviewed me before I went assignment, and he said, do you have any questions? He looked at my resume. He said, well, I have one question. Is any place in the jail off limits to me? Is there any place that I can't go? He said, no. You want to roam around, you can go any place you want. I said, the mental ward, the medical ward, how about the rubber room? He said, the rubber room, go. Rubber room was a room about 20 by 20 that was rubber all around the walls. And that was those with either drugs or alcohol, and they were naked in there. And they only had a hole in the center of the floor that they'd use for the bathroom. And that because they couldn't hurt themselves or injure themselves in that room. Sometimes they were there for 4 or 5 days till they came back to normal or semi-normal. And as I walked out my office, there were 3 deputies going along, and they had a baseball bat that was splintered. And one of them was carrying a mattress. And I said, where y'all going? And they said, to the rubber room. And they said, you better go in your office. She says, you might not approve of what's going to happen. I said, it doesn't matter whether I approve or not. It's whether the Lord approves. And so I started following them. And of course, they wouldn't do anything then. Yeah. And so the word got around that new Catholic chaplain, you can't do anything around him that's not proper, that's not right, that he won't approve of it, or he will give you a great argument or something. And so that's why I said that I had so much on them that there was no way they were going to fire me for breaking the rules. But anyway, the other Methodist minister or the Baptist, the Episcopalian, they told them to go in their office. They would go, because they had a wife and 2 or 3 kids to support, and they needed the job. And I didn't. I knew if I walked out the door any time, I could go back to being a pastor. So I could more or less operate the way I wanted to there. And as a result of that, I made it pretty miserable for some of those deputies. It's really funny. The lady in charge of education was Kathy Taylor, a Catholic lady from St. Anne's, and she's all of education. And she was in good ways with Sheriff Cleveland, and all of them thought that she was having an affair with him. She really wasn't, but she had him twisted around her fingers. Anything she wanted, he would do. And funny, I'd be getting off the elevator, and she said, Chaplain O'Connor, do you have time to hear my confession? These ladies are driving me mad. I said, sure, Kathy, I got time for you anytime. And it was funny that she retired after a while, and she went to San Jose, California, and met a fella she knew about 20 years before, and they got engaged and got married. We're going to get married. It's coming back to St. Nicholas there to get married there at the church I was pastor. And after being at the jail a couple of years, a black pastor died, and Phil Rinder called me up and asked me to go pastor the black church. I said, Bishop, I like what I'm doing. I'm enjoying it and having fun. He said, well, do both jobs. I said, how am I supposed to spend my time? Now, on the phone, he said, any damn way you please. And I said, you put that in writing and you got a deal. He sent me a letter and said, according to your prudent discernment, split your time between St. Nicholas Church as pastor and the Harris County Jail as chaplain, which I had to spend 8 hours a day at the jail from 8 to 4, and then in the mornings from 6 to 8, and then in the evenings from 4 to 10, I'd be at the church. And I did that for 10 years. Would you believe that St. Nicholas never complained? The jail never complained. But when I left, they had to have 2 priests, one at the jail and one at the parish. Nobody would do both jobs. But I really was not fatigued or tired out or burnt out. I just really enjoyed the Lord's work and doing the Lord's job, no matter what it took or how much time or how much effort. As long as the Lord was supplying my aid, my strength, my support, and the Holy Spirit, I was able to carry on. But there were many, many interesting experiences and happenings. And if anybody has any question or two, I'd be glad to answer. Anybody have any questions about anything? Oh, they were what?
I see you just got through the first 10 years. What happened after that?
What was that? I didn't hear you.
You just got us through the first 10 years. What happened after that?
I still didn't get it.
He said, you just covered the first 10 years. What happened after that?
Yeah, well, other things that just keep happening and going on. And, as you well know here, that I've been, I think, 20 years since about 95 or 96 associated with y'all here, huh? And enjoy coming to the meetings, enjoy being part of you and your families and your life in the service and the work of the Lord. Yes?
Senior, for young people that might listen to this video who are interested in sports, would you just comment? We all know that you have the opportunity to play sports professionally, but just mention that.
She's asking about your baseball career before you quit.
Yeah, well, like I say, in high school, it was during the war, during World War II, 41 to 45. And all the big league baseball players, the good ones, were in the service, in the Army, Navy, Marines, or something. And so I finished high school at 16, because only went 11 years. They put in 12 years a couple of years later. And so the New York Yankees and St. Louis Cardinals both wanted to sign me to contracts, knowing that I got played for a couple of years before being drafted. And they offered me, just as a 16-year-old kid, to sign up. I had to have, of course, my parents' permission, with more money, or 5 times as much money as my father made in a year. That was their initial offering to me, which was quite a bit of money in those days, like $200,000 or $300,000, which today would be in the millions, you know. But anyway, I passed that up to give the Lord a chance to work in my life. And the Lord never quit working in my life. And so that's why I'm very grateful and thankful, and I'm still here today. Thank you. Very good. All of you now. I always enjoy being here.
Oh, thank you.
Enjoy having you.
How do you come back from that?